when I got invited to speak, of course, anytime the Lakewood crew asked me to come share, good morning, I get super excited. But then they're like, oh, by the way, good morning, Farah. We need you to talk about intimacy. And hey, Daryl. And I thought, oh my gosh, I wish I would have asked what the topic was before, because there's certain words in the English language that I think all of us have certain words in English we just don't like. In fact, I was looking up like what words people don't like. Apparently people don't like the word moist. It's apparently a very unpopular word. Moist doesn't bother me so much, but the word that really bothers me is intimacy, and I don't know why, but I've just never liked that word. And so when I go to a marriage conference or something and they say, hey, we're going to talk about intimacy, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I'm about to get an important phone call. I just don't like the word, and maybe it's a guy thing, but I know that intimacy is important because everybody uses that. Good morning, Amina and Danny. Glad y'all are here this morning. So we're going to talk about intimacy, but just for the sake of my own ears and maybe for yours too, what I would prefer to call it is closeness. We'll refer over the next few minutes to the idea of intimacy as closeness. And I'm going to specifically come at the angle of what emotional closeness looks like. I am, just a little bit about my background, I have a master's degree in counseling, but after I got that master's degree in counseling, did lots of clinical counseling to get my internship. Good morning, Cindy. I got that master's degree and I discovered I don't actually like clinical counseling. What I do like, though, is getting people in the outdoors and helping them get a perspective on their life. The formula for our outdoor adventures that I do is change of pace plus change of place equals change of perspective. Morning, Gina. Hello. And that's what I want. That's my goal with all of counseling. Most of counseling really is about not teaching you something new, but it's really kind of maybe giving you some tools for how to use what you already know, right? So there's sort of, especially as Christians, we have the Holy Spirit guiding us into all truth. And a lot of times what we need to do is just tap into that and get insight. Hey, good morning, Valerie and Melody. Welcome. So I want to, today, this will be kind of like our little counseling session, but we're going to do it Joël style, my goal is just to give you a little bit of a change of perspective. And I'm going to try to, what I want to do is I want to go over what I consider kind of the 5 levels of intimacy and how do we get to those levels of closeness. I'm going to use that word closeness again because I don't like the word intimacy. But we're going to talk about how to get to that 5th level, which is kind of the ultimate level of closeness that I believe God intends for us in marriage. And what we'll do is at the end, if you've got some questions, I'm happy to answer those to the best of my knowledge. I've been doing counseling for quite a few years, unique counseling. And good morning, Lori and Valerie. So what we'll do is we'll leave those questions to the end. So if you have a question, just jot it down. Also, if you want the notes for this, I'm going to blow through this really fast because we could go into a lot of depth on all this. But if you want the notes for this, I set up a little thing on my website where you can text text the word closeness, CLOSENESS, to 44222. And if you'll text to that number, full disclosure, you're getting signed up for regular weekly emails from me too. There'll be short emails, but you can unsubscribe anytime you want. But if you want to get those notes and get this, it's all printed out for you in a little 2-page sheet. You can text closeness to 44222 and you'll get that while I'm talking to you. So let's dive right in. I want to start with a story of an epic marriage fail, a marriage closeness fail on my part. My daughter Elise, when I found out that she was going to be born, I think a lot of guys have this. I started freaking out about the financial money side of it. And so I built out a business in the time that my wife was pregnant, and the time we launched was about 3 months before before our daughter was born. And man, the business took off. It started just killing it. We were making more money than we never made before. I was obsessed with it. I was working all hours. of the day and night on this business, and it was taking off. It was a coaching business. I was helping people achieve goals and set goals and plans for their life and go after those, kind of with combining, of course, with working as if it depends on you, praying as if it depends on God. So we had this kind of a Christian goal-setting coaching thing so I had going on. So it was taken off. Well, our daughter came along, and I was so excited because I could work from home with this job. And I thought, this is so great. I'm going to be available to my wife. I'm going to be able to help with our daughter. The business is going really well. I had my little office upstairs. We converted our attic into an office. And the business took off right about the time our daughter was born. And so I would work, and then I'd come down and help my wife. And I was like, man, I'm winning at life. I am the man. Like, I'm running a business over here. We're making more money than we've ever made in our lives. And I'm the dad who's at home caring for our daughter. And my wife is just loving it. And this was going great, right, for like about 4 months. And I'll never forget, about 4 months in, we were out walking our daughter. It was actually in Houston, a little park called Burroughs Park. It's a beautiful park up in North Houston, up near Spring. And we were walking our daughter around, and my wife, I was like, man, isn't life good? And she turns to me and she goes, I kind of feel alone. I was like, what? I said, alone? What do you mean? She's like, I just feel like I'm doing this on my own. I feel like I'm raising our child on our own. And I'm like, what in the world are you talking about? Like, I have set up life to where I'm perfectly available to make us money and to spend time with you and to raise our daughter. And she said, yeah, I know, but I feel alone. And I was angry, of course. One of the things I talk about a lot, I've got a new book coming out called Love Slows Down, How to Keep Anger and Anxiety from Ruining Life's Relationships. It talks about how anger and worry can really mess things up, and this personal experience the book is from. But I got angry at first. I thought, how is this possible, man? I've set up life to where I can be close to you, we have the relationships, I work from home, but she felt alone. Now, here's what I know about you watching this, okay? I know that many of you right now in your own home, you are surrounded by family, surrounded by lots of kids. Maybe you and your spouse, you even feel like you communicate on a pretty good level, but you still feel a level of aloneness. You feel like, man, I'm just kind of living my own life, and yeah, we're together under the same roof, and we're raising the kids, and we have some of our same goals, but I feel alone. I feel emotionally alone. I don't feel connected. And it is so easy for our marriages to be two alone people living together. And you say, how is this possible? You would think, living together, we would naturally be close, but man, it's so easy for marriage to fall into a place where we feel alone. And the verse that comes to mind is the classic verse that they read always at every wedding. I've done a couple weddings, and we always read Mark 10:7-8. It says, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. What that verse is saying is there's something really spiritual, powerful that happens when we become married, and it's actually a unifying of two people, two unique people, into one flesh, and that requires a level of closeness. God's call for us is to become super close. In fact, marriage is really a picture of what our relationship with Christ is supposed to look like. We're called to love our spouses unconditionally, no matter what they do. Richard and Sherry and I, we wrote a book recently called Really Marriage Can Get Better. And one of the concepts we talk about in there that's huge is the idea that if you really want to love your spouse, it's got to be unconditional. It's not like a tipping relationship where tipping is like, hey, you treat me good, you keep my glass filled, that the waiter keeps your glass filled and keeps the napkins coming, and then I'll tip you at the end. Marriage doesn't work like that. That's not a good foundation for marriage. If you want your marriage to be solid, it's got to be based on unconditional love. Like it's not a contract where it's like, if you break your vow, I'll break mine. No, it's a covenant where it says, even if you can't fulfill what you've been called to do, I'm going to fulfill my part. So what happens is when marriage comes together and we're unified, and that's where we really are stronger, we're unified. And let me make something really clear. A lot of times people say, oh, marriage is two halves becoming a whole. No, that's not the case. The goal of marriage is for two whole individuals, whole right in their relationship with God, to come together and become a super powerful individual, right? So the goal isn't, I found my other half. That can make you think, oh, it's two incomplete individuals. But here's the thing. If you're looking for fulfillment, the thing you're missing from your spouse, they're never going to be able to fulfill it. They won't be able to. Only God can fulfill that. But when we come together and you're unified together and we're connected with God, there's this powerful thing that happens. So the goal is closeness, but as you've probably noticed, life gets in the way, man. Life gets busy. Before you know it, you and your spouse haven't sat down for a date night in weeks. You haven't even sat down to talk about anything other than transactional business for days. Things have gotten so busy. The kids are always running around. You're so tired by the end of the day. You don't have anything left to give, and it's just like you just fall asleep or you just binge out and watch TV, and you're just like, I'll be over here watching TV, I'll be over here watching TV, and just leave me alone. And we fall into this tendency, the world naturally just kind of pulls us apart. Speed of life tends to pull us apart. But the goal is to maintain a high level of closeness. So I wanted to talk about the 5 levels of closeness, the way I see it. This isn't anything set in stone, and I've given them titles. If you've downloaded the notes, you can follow along there. The first level of closeness, emotional closeness, is what I would call the superficial level. This is where it's just small talk, right? This is what you have with people at the grocery store. Hey, how about this weather, right? And then if you ask somebody how they're doing, the answer always has to be, oh, I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. That's superficial level. We keep that with people around us. You're always just kind of like on this superficial level, hopefully, of at least being kind and courteous. That's what we call just general courtesy. Superficial level, obviously, you need to get beyond that for marriage, right? The second level would be something I would call maybe the informational level. This is where you start to share information about yourself and your life, but it's nothing deep, right? It's like your preferences, what movies you like, what music you like, what food you like, where you went on vacation. You might even get to this level with somebody at the grocery store. If you're talking for a few minutes and they're like, hey, you look a little tan. Oh yeah, I just got back from the beach, right? That's the informational level, and it's just a little bit deeper than the superficial level. The next level is what I would call the perspective level. And this is where you start to risk sharing your perspectives on politics, religion, or other things that you're pretty sure you felt out the relationship, you're pretty sure you agree on it. So you dive into thinking about, man, these politicians these days, or that one politician, or man, that one religion over there. And you know each other enough to where you dive a little bit deeper. Now, those first 3 levels are kind of levels we have with general people, but then there's the other 2 levels that we get into, and this is where I think marriage operates. Ultimately, we'll go into the 5th level. But the 4th level is where you start to share how you feel about things. You feel about yourself, you feel about others, anxiety, worry, depression. You may even venture into sharing some of your hopes and dreams. Now, I believe that these last 2, the 4th and the 5th, are reserved for marriage. In fact, if you are talking about levels 4 and 5 with anybody other than of the opposite sex that's not your spouse, there's a good chance you're headed for trouble, okay? So you could use this for a sign to say, man, I've gotten to that level with somebody at work. You might want to be really cautious. If you've gotten to this level with somebody at work that's of the opposite sex, should not be having these conversations, you're heading for trouble. The 4th level, that soul level, your soul is consistent. The Greek word in the Bible that's used for soul is psyche, which is where the word psychology comes from. And your psychology is your emotions, your desires, and your thoughts. When you start sharing those, that little deeper part of yourself, a connection starts to be formed. And so if you're having these kind of relationships with coworkers of the opposite sex, be very concerned, okay? These are the conversations that need to be reserved for, if you're in a good community of mentorship guys, if you're in a mentorship with other guys, you can be confident sharing these levels on an emotional level. But man, you should not be doing this, in my opinion, with the opposite sex. The people that I've talked to that get into affairs, it starts with texting these kind of things. My wife, and she writes back, oh, she just doesn't value what you bring to the table. She doesn't understand how great you are at work or whatever. And these are the things you get into this level 4 and you start getting into some dangerous areas. We should reserve these for our spouse, right? Level 5 is what I would call true closeness. This is where we start to share those deep fears, maybe the failures, how we feel about ourselves personally, and maybe failures we've thought in our mind of, desires of our heart, secrets. And we risk vulnerability and openness. And this is when you get into vulnerability and openness. And this is what I believe is the ultimate level of closeness that we're called to in our relationship. Again, a marriage is supposed to be a picture of our relationship with God's relationship with us, where we feel completely open and vulnerable. If you think about Adam and Eve in the beginning, they felt completely naked. They weren't afraid to share with God. He even hung out with them. But as soon as sin came in, they started to get afraid and they covered themselves. And we've all been living that way ever since. There's parts of us we say, oh, no, I can't let anybody see that. I can't let anybody see that. Now, here's the thing. I believe you can measure the level of health of your marital relationship by how willing you are to go to level 5. Because what happens in marriages, I see this all the time, is I've met people who are in marriages that they literally stay at the level 2 and level 3. Like Emily and I, we walk away and we're like, those people are like robots. Like like everything's purely informational for them. Like they pursue dreams, and some of them are very successful. We've talked to some people that are very successful, but it's like you don't see any emotional connection between them. Everything's just transactional. We have achieved our goals. Next, he will be going on to get his doctorate. And there's like, oh my gosh, do they have any emotional connection? But it's like they're business partners. And we've seen marriages that are like this. There's no level of sharing hopes and dreams. It's all about information or their perspective on things. I mean, I've met people who are pretty much married because they're on the same side politically and they're just determined to go after political goals together. But there's not a lot of emotional depth to them. But I think that level of health in your marriage is how willing are you to go to level 5 and 4 and 5? Because oftentimes in marriages, you go to level 4 and 5, but when you get hurt, what do? You pull back. You say, oh, it's not safe to go there. It's not safe to talk about my feelings. It's not safe to talk about how I felt like I failed here. It's not safe to talk about how I felt alone here. So what happens is you pull back. And man, you can throw yourself into relationships with your kids, right? You don't have to worry about that. But the closer you are to level 5, I believe that's the way you can measure, and one of the easiest ways to measure the health of your relationship is, are you willing to have those conversations? Are you willing to go into those deeper levels? And if you find yourself saying, man, as I'm reading this, I haven't had a level 4 or 5 conversation with my spouse in a long time, you got something you need to work on. And maybe that's the conversation you need to have. You say, man, we haven't had this level 4 or level 5 conversation in a while. And listen, here's the thing. This is where it gets really tricky. You need about 90 minutes a week just to communicate levels 2 and 3, okay? So you need like 90 minutes of focus time with your spouse a week. That's an hour and a half just to talk about the transactional issues of like, who's gonna get the kids to soccer practice? How are we gonna deal with this? What are we gonna do about this money situation? You need 90 minutes just for those levels 2 and 3. So that's just for that. So I believe you also need another 90 minutes minimum to be having these 4 and 5 conversations. So what happens a lot of times is on a date night, it's like the only time you get to have these conversations about the level 2 and 3 stuff. And so you're having all these transactional meetings, but you still feel alone even after a date night. What I would encourage you to do is set aside a time for the transactional stuff, the levels 2 and 3 stuff, and then at date night, or maybe other times, the level 4 and 5. And here's the thing. For women, when you get to the level 5, that's when they're a little bit, we've had this experience, right? Yes, level 5 conversations are a sign of marital health. That's right on. And when you have those conversations, here's the thing, guys, here's a little secret. Guys, a lot of times they want the physical intimacy before they'll have the conversation, but I can guarantee this, women most of the time want the emotional intimacy, the level 5 conversation, and it will naturally lead to the physical intimacy. So if you're saying, it's just the way it is, guys. You're sorry. You're like, wait, it shouldn't be that way. Sorry, that's how God wired us. So just deal with it. And so suck it up and have the level 5s. But here's the thing, and this is where I want to go into it. We achieve closeness through 3 specific ways. And we'll look if you're looking through the notes. The first one is through shared experience. Okay? So that's through spiritual experiences, personal experiences, or relational experiences that we have together. Which is one of the reasons I'm passionate about my outdoor adventures. I'm obsessed with this idea. Listen, if you really want to build depth in your relationship, it's never going to happen around things. It's going to happen around experiences. I always say store up experiences, don't store up things. Because you've probably noticed the best conversations you have aren't about, hey, remember that 65-inch TV we used to have? Man, that thing was so amazing. No. Those aren't the memories that you have. The memories that you have are, man, remember when we were doing, well, like one of the memories Emily and I always go back to is we went to the Galapagos Islands one time on Valentine's Day, and we sat on this dock as sun was setting, and we ate sushi, but we had to fight off a sea lion that was coming to try and take our sushi off the dock. And that's a memory we always have, and that can't be taken away, and we can always kind of go back around that because it's this shared experience. And on my trips, I have people on my Summit Leaders trips where we go on outdoor adventures, they say, I know the guys on this trip that I've only been with for 5 days better than people I've been in church with for 10 years. There's something about this shared experience that brings people together. So that's why I think one of the best things you can do is don't store up stuff or junk. Don't be constantly buying if we just had this or that. No, man, I would say experiences are where you're going to get your best bang for your buck. I mean, there's literature, scientific literature showing that experiences lead to the ongoing kind of they have the most ongoing satisfaction. So man, maybe you need to start investing more in some of these experiences you have with your spouse where you do things together, shared experiences. I say shared challenging experiences. That's one of the things I look for in all my outdoor adventures is there a shared challenge? We're going to get to the top of X mountain. We're going to raft to X point. And when you've got that shared experiences, it brings people together. And so shared experiences is one of the ways that you can do this. And maybe your dates need to be more about what the experience you share rather than the expense of the date, because it's the shared experience that brings that. The second thing, believe it or not, is it's through conflict. Okay, conflict, believe it or not, brings us together if it's done in a healthy way. Now, I could do a whole talk on that. I've got a whole book about dealing with this kind of thing. Again, it's coming out in September, Love Slows Down, How to Keep Anger and Anxiety from Ruining Life's Relationships. So there's some shameless self-promotion. If you would pre-order that, I'd be really grateful. But conflict is one of the ways we work out our differences of experience. Like, you grew up with some different background. I mean, we still have this, my wife and I. We had similar families growing up, similar socioeconomic class, but man, the way her family did stuff versus the way my family did stuff, sometimes I see her doing things, I'm like, why do you do it that way? And it's because her family did that. So we have conflict over her experience of what life was like growing up and like what she got from her experience and what I got from my experience. And so we're having to work that through. We have conflict over perspectives on things. It's okay to argue if you do it in a healthy, respectful way about it. I think you have a wrong perspective on this. I think you've got a mental block on that. Or even your opinions and feelings. But when you do it from the safety of a committed relationship, that's where it's got to happen. When you're in that level 4 and level 5 and you're feeling safe enough to have those conversations, conflict is okay. It's sometimes we think to be the spiritual, godly person, we've got to avoid all conflict. Wrong. That's not true. You've got to go into all conflict with an unoffendable heart, with a forgiving heart, but having no conflict means you're dead. So if dead people don't have conflict, right? But if there's conflict, that means you're alive, and it means it's a good thing, and it means you're still communicating, right? In a good way, hopefully. So level 4 and level 5, getting there and having some conflict is okay. It's okay to have that if you do it in a healthy, respectful way out of love. And then the third way that we grow we achieve closeness is through time. And that's why I believe marriage is meant to be a lifetime. Because the length of time we spend together creates a natural commitment and closeness to one another. And you've got those relationships. I've got friends in my life that, maybe I won't see them for 5, 6, 7 years, but when we get back together, we've been friends for 30 years. And it's just like instant connection. We can instantly go to these level 4 or level 5 conversations as couples and hang out with them because time has built the connection. It's built the connection that's lasted. And that's what marriage is. It's supposed to be a lifetime, right? Because you're constantly figuring out who you are. I'm 43, and I'm literally like through this COVID thing, I have been figuring out things about myself that have been right in front of me, didn't even see, and I've been realizing, man, for one, I've been realizing I am such a proud person. I'm so prideful. And I'm so prideful. And there's so many parts of me that I'm just realizing about myself. And we're constantly realizing truths about ourselves. We're constantly realizing truths about ourselves. And we're kind of like a flower opening up. And your spouse is that way too. And it takes a lifetime to really get to that level of closeness as you're learning more and more. I know there's some of you watching that have probably been married 40, 50 years, and you're saying the same thing, like, who is this person I'm married to? You're constantly finding out new layers of who this person is, and they're figuring out new layers of who they are. And time builds the closeness, but you've got to invest the time. I've found that so many times when we're just trying to operate at that 2 and 3 level, we share information about what happened in the day, but the stuff we really want, like when I come home from my trips, my Summit Leaders trips, my wife's always like, hey, how was the trip? And I'm like, oh, it was good. And I can unpack details about the trip, the informational stuff. Oh, we did this. We got to this point by this day. This happened. It rained on us, blah, blah, blah. And my wife's like, that's not what I really wanted. But you know what? It takes me some time emotionally to come and realize, oh, I remember this interaction, that interaction. That'll happen 4 or 5 days later. And so we'll be sitting at breakfast and I'll be like, on this trip, that happened or whatever. And she'll look at me, she'll be like, that's what I really wanted to know. But it takes time. And that's a function of how your neurological, your brain works, right? There's this thing called the default network. And the default network is the part of your brain that kind of, when you're not thinking about anything specific, your brain is still always working. Your brain literally never shuts off, thank goodness. But the default network, when your brain actually stops thinking about a specific thing, it goes to the default network, and the default network specifically thinks about relational issues. So a lot of times the relational component to issues comes up only later. So you can share what happened, but when you want to share how you felt about what happened, sometimes it takes a few days for that to come out. And I've found that with my daughter sometimes. How was school today? And she'll tell me, oh, it's good, sort of that. But like 6 or 7 days later, when we're sitting in the car and I've left time, I usually leave the radio off so that if she wants to talk, she can talk. All of a sudden she'll come out and she'll be like, this little boy was mean to me at school today. And I'm like, oh, that's the stuff I wanted to know about, right? But it takes time to get to that place. It takes time to get to that place because our minds just aren't always thinking about the emotional component about it. So to get to that level 4 and level 5, sometimes, guys, it just takes a lot of time. And I wish sometimes we could speed up conversations. You know, I started listening to audiobooks a couple years back, and I love it because I'm a slow reader, but I can listen to audiobooks at double speed. I can get through like a 5-hour book in 2.5 hours, and it's awesome. And this sounds horrible, but sometimes I wish I could speed up conversations like that. It's like, okay, let's just get to the point. Get to the point here. Okay, come on. But it doesn't work that way. And it takes time, and it takes investment of time to get to that closeness. And that's the only way you're going to get there. Through the shared experiences, through conflict, and then most importantly, through just committed time to your spouse. So I would just encourage you guys, closeness is the key. Closeness is what you want, but the whole world is out to separate you from closeness. And if you're in your relationship right now, and you saw that maybe you're not having that level 4 and 5 conversations with your spouse, you're actually having those with somebody besides your spouse that's of the opposite sex, I would be very concerned. You need to check in on that, and maybe you need to start communicating with your spouse about, say, hey, for some reason, I don't feel comfortable talking about these things. Can we talk about that? And when you start having those level 4 and 5 conversations, I guarantee you it'll take your closeness to the next level, and you'll really get what you really want. But if you're trying to seek those out in places that you shouldn't, the marriage relationship is the close place for it. And of course, your direct relationship with God is a place for those conversations. I think that's the key. I think that the key to intimacy, there's that word I can't stand. The key to intimacy, the key to closeness is making sure that we're focused on those level 4 and 5 conversations. If you're just joining and you're like, what is he talking about? You can get the notes for this talk. You can, of course, watch the video on the replay. But these level 4 and 5 conversations, in the notes, you can text closeness, the word closeness, that's the message, to the number 44222, and you'll get these notes here. But as you have those conversations, I believe that your marriage is going to go to the next level. Bible promises, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has perceived what God has in store for those who put their trust and hope in Him. And that is our goal in all of this. Connection with God, connection with our spouse, and there's no upper limits to where your marriage can go. I mean, your marriage can go beyond, exceedingly abundantly, far above all you could ever ask or imagine. But it takes intentional focus on staying connected. Remember, what God has joined together, let no one separate. That's the goal. The goal is to stay connected through a lifetime.